Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me today. On Tuesday night, Donald Trump delivered his joint session to Congress speech, and it was full of lies, racism, and attacks. I'm going to fact-check his speech here. I'm not going to play any clips in terms of him speaking. We rarely play Donald Trump speaking on the show because, of course, media attention is what gave rise to power for him in the first place. But I do want to note here that one of the big moments of the night was when Democratic Congressman Al Green stood up, vehemently denouncing the president, yelling, "You cut Medicaid." He said this multiple times, and while he was speaking, the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, stood up, ordered him to sit back down. Mr. Green continued to yell at the president, and then he was removed from the chamber by the sergeant at arms.
Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote.
1 month gain ever recorded.
Mr. President.
A 41-point jump.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning.
So that essentially was how the night started. And we do have some breaking news on that front here because Al Green stood up to deliberately denounce the president and speaking truth here that he did cut Medicaid in those tax cuts. The United States House of Representatives has just voted 211 to 209 to move forward with censuring Representative Al Green. Of course, all because he decided to protest Trump's speech. Green was already physically removed from the chamber, but that wasn't enough for these Republicans, of course. This isn't about decorum. It is simply about silencing dissent. So once again, this major breaking news here that Congressman Al Green, a Democrat from the state of Texas, has been censured in the House of Representatives 211 to 209. What censorship means in the House effectively is just to publicly denounce a member, essentially to publicly punish them. It does not mean they'll be removed from Congress. Removed from Congress, that's expulsion. Censorship is to publicly denounce what they've said or what they've done. So that breaking news there on that front, just absolutely incredible. I mean, yelling at the president while he's speaking is something that Republicans do. It's something that Republicans are accustomed to doing. Of course, after this, Trump falsely claimed that he ended government censorship and brought back free speech. Really, you did? It was never gone. If anyone were to think here, it would be that your administration is doing the censoring. I mean, a Democratic member of Congress was just kicked out for yelling the truth at you. That in and of itself is antithetical to your point. You don't say that you brought free speech back and then enable an abrasive and abhorrent attack on it. You don't say that you ended government censorship when your administration is literally going after media organizations that don't cover you or agree with you, or cover you the way that Fox News maniacally and religiously covers you. You don't say that you've ended government censorship when anybody that disagrees with you ought to be fired, and that includes hundreds of thousands of federal employees who are part of the, quote, deep state, as you like to call it. And it's important to note here that this speech, in and of itself, was very dictatorial in form. Dictatorial. He established multiple enemies, including the opposition party, labeling the Democrats as those people, and falsely claimed that Biden's economy was bad. No, it was not. Under Joe Biden's economy, the United States was the envy of the world for how good the economy was booming again. A key reason why Americans were hurting is because of Trump's inflation that he left Biden, and also a bunch of CEOs gathered on a phone call to raise prices on Americans and then essentially let them blame it on the government. It's called corporate price gouging. Anybody with a basic level of common sense and who took high school economics 101 understands that. Trump then launched a racist and vituperative attack on DEI, calling it tyrannical and that our country would be woke no longer. What they and anyone who is against DEI really means is that America will no longer prioritize minority rights. And Donald Trump has done just a great job doing that because, of course, revoking all the major civil rights progress going back decades is going to be great for everybody writ large. DEI is the new conservative corporate N-word. They act like, essentially you're just hired off of race alone. And apparently qualifications don't factor in. No, that's for mostly unqualified white people with little to no experience who just get hired. But if you're black with a college degree, work 12 times harder and even more qualified than your white counterpart, despite all of that, you are less likely to get hired. You also have to prove yourself more. That's the truth in this country, even far so for black women. The highest recipients, the people who benefit the most from DEI are white women in this country. White women benefit the most from DEI. When you think about people who are hired merely based off their skin color, regardless of qualifications, it's really, really just white people, specifically white men. Specifically white men. Black people and minorities have to work 10 times harder just to prove that they are worthy of such a position. Even though they went to college, they got the degree for it, they have incredible experience, 20 to 30 years or 12 to 20 years of experience, they still have to work 10 times harder just to prove themselves. We are not the highest beneficiaries of DEI. Trust me, do your research. He also called it tyrannical. He called critical race theory poison. Of course, because critical race theory in Donald Trump's mind is any type of history that makes white people feel uncomfortable. Slavery makes people uncomfortable. It makes people, it's white grievance. So slavery makes white people feel uncomfortable. But attacks on the black community and on Hispanics and on, Asian Americans in the past by the white community, does it make us feel uncomfortable? I mean, what part of history are we prioritizing here? White power? White supremacy? Because in and of itself, when we talk about the logic here of white people feeling uncomfortable, specifically, if you are feeling uncomfortable and you are of white descent, you might be racist. You 100% might be racist if you feel uncomfortable that slavery is being taught. And this makes me feel bad about. No, I mean, come on. In and of itself, you do not like something being taught in school, so you're actively looking to remove it. Because it makes your people feel uncomfortable. It's just absolutely insane. I mean, when you consider the facts here, when you look at the argument, black people also are really, really uncomfortable learning about the history of slavery, learning about the history of our community being systematically oppressed, learning about the history of members of our community being slaughtered and killed and bombed by the government. We are equally as terrified, but it's not because we don't want to learn about it. It's because we need to learn about it, but also understanding how this country has treated our people in the past. And that it is essential to know this history, to recognize the signs and the patterns, and to also to honor the work and the extreme valor of our ancestors. DEI is not the problem. It is the corporate N-word, so they can get away with saying stuff like this and so they can justify mass firings. Because, of course, planes falling out the sky is, let's blame it on diversity, equity, and inclusion, when there is no correlation. It is modern day racism, as Donald Trump has revoked civil rights acts that go all the way back to the 1960s. That's what this is. Donald Trump also claimed that there was an invasion at the border. And this goes along with an executive order that he signed on day one, protecting the American people against an invasion, and that he declared a national emergency at the border. Now, thousands of U.S. troops are stationed there. There is no invasion. There is no crisis at the southern border. He said the same thing about before the 2018 midterm elections, that there was a huge migrant caravan coming to terrorize the United States, and this is why people needed to vote Republican. It's the same old racist, xenophobic rhetoric. There was no invasion at the southern border. There's nothing coming. There's nobody coming. He also claimed that Biden let in all kinds of people, including 21 million illegal immigrants. Wow, really? 21 million? According to the Migration Policy Institute, the real number is more than 5.8 million. Quote, they were temporarily allowed into the country through multiple parole and sponsorship programs, many of which have been dramatically curbed or ended by the Trump administration. Migrants who participated in these programs were vetted before being allowed into the country. End quote. Aha, they were vetted. They were not just allowed into the country. Trump also said that we ended the Green New Deal. There was never a Green New Deal. It was just a piece of legislation that the GOP has just run with. It was only a piece of legislation. It was never passed into law. Trump went on to claim that DOJ has found hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud, including millions for making rats transgender. I wish I could make this stuff up, honestly. But, I mean, it's true. He said it. I mean, what has DOJ actually found? Relatively nothing. And they keep backtracking as they supposedly did and have found stuff. What they're actually doing is slashing essential government programs, institutions, and departments that affect your life directly. That's what they're doing. How is DOJ ending government waste, fraud, and abuse when Donald Trump is directly and illegally firing all the inspector generals who are tasked with investigating waste, fraud, and abuse? I mean, it almost makes you think, who's on the wrong side here? In his speech, he indicated that DOJ is headed by Elon Musk, which of course is going to unleash legal chaos, because in court they said before a judge that Musk was not in charge of DOJ. The incompetence and stupidity of this administration is so staggering and inexplicable that it's almost incomprehensible. How messy and shambolic this administration is. He said, of course, that the days of unelected bureaucrats are over, while an unelected billionaire bureaucrat named Elon Musk is literally destroying the government right now. He also made insanely false claims about Social Security, saying that the oldest recipient is more than 360 years old. This mendacious, nonsensical claim is essentially to justify going after the program to end it completely. Let us make people think that there's something so inherently and deliberately and terribly wrong and inherently wrong with Social Security that we have to weed out Social Security to completely make it better for you. No, they're going to go after Social Security completely. This is something that was warned about in Project 2025, and they've already started. Musk and his gang of teenagers have already accessed the Social Security Administration, forcing the top official at the agency to resign. According to the acting head of the agency today, DOJ is driving broad cuts to the Social Security Agency and will make mistakes. Of course, they're already going after the IRS. As of this week, more than 90,000 employees are set to be fired. As of last week, more than 7,000 employees were let go. So, of course, DOJ is doing great jobs, right? Weeding out all that waste, fraud, and abuse, because I'm sure the oldest recipient is 360 years old. I mean, what kind of idiot would say something like that? Looking at the facts, looking at the logic, no one in this country is more than 360 years old, and they benefit from Social Security still. I mean, these claims have also been debunked as well. He then also said that the new tax cuts that the House just passed are for working Americans, not the rich. And then he urged the Senate to pass it quickly. Of course, this is 100% false. We covered here on the show just last week how those tax cuts are only for the rich. Trump also had a weird segment on tariffs, falsely claiming that Canada and Mexico imposed tremendously high tariffs on the United States. And so starting on April 2nd, we're going to do counter tariffs. It's going to be so reciprocal. Whatever they tariff us, we will tariff them. The stuff that comes out of this guy's mouth is just incredible. It's remarkable how his linguistics works. I mean, to say something, to conjure up something so profoundly dumb. If you put tariffs on other countries, how many times do we have to say this? Goodness. If you put tariffs on other countries, more tariffs than we already have put on them, that only hurts the American people. We will be paying even more for living, for groceries, for gas, for everything. Thousands more jobs will be lost. He also said that, in regard to the trade war, that farmers love him and that tariffs are going to be a great thing for the farmers. That is 100% false. Farmers are already freaking out about tariffs because it's not going to be a great thing for them. It's going to hurt their industry tremendously, as they are already trying to deal with killing their chickens due to bird flu. He said that tariffs protect American jobs. No, they do not. They endanger them, in fact. Trump then called the World Health Organization corrupt and praised the fact that we withdrew from it in addition to the United Nations Human Rights Council, which he has called un-American, which is in line, of course, with Project 2025, as we've covered here on the show quite a few times. I mean, this agenda implies directly, implicitly calls for the United States to reduce its role on the world stage and step away from globalism and put America first. It literally says that if an international organization does not benefit the interests of America, we should leave it. So far, we have left multiple groups. Elon Musk is calling, of course, for the United States to withdraw from NATO. And then, of course, when you go to USAID's website, it looks like this. We're going to have special reporting this Saturday on the devastating and horrific consequences posed to getting rid of USAID, including millions of deaths from children in the coming decade, if this program were to be completely eradicated. Of course, also, we have left the World Health Organization. We've left the UN Human Rights Council, of course. We're also ending USAID, and we also have left the Paris Climate Accord. What's next? In regard to globalism here, while we're on the topic, Trump's speech also included threats to our allies, including Panama and Greenland, saying, quote, "We need Greenland for international and national security. One way or the other, we're going to get it." And when he said that, he kind of really said that in a menacing way. He said it in a menacing way to the people of Greenland. I mean, you cannot just say something like that. Greenland is part of NATO territory. That's why Greenland, in and of itself, is its own country, of course, controlled by the Kingdom of Denmark, which, since Donald Trump has taken office, the Prime Minister of Denmark has been trying to get Trump to realize here that, hey, Greenland, sir, is not up for sale. You cannot just take Greenland. They've also bolstered military defense in Greenland to ensure that they are ready to fight a U.S. invasion of the country. He speaks about this like the people of Greenland want this. I mean, only 6% of Greenland population is in favor of joining the United States. Only 6%. This anti-globalism rhetoric and stance comes as he said that Russia is ready to make a peace deal with Ukraine. If Russia really wanted to make peace, they would just leave Ukraine flat out instead of still, illegally occupying the territory. He said that Zelensky's letter to him was much appreciated, while also that same week ending U.S. military aid for Ukraine and recently ending sharing U.S. intelligence with Ukraine, which of course has helped that country greatly. So we're going to stop sending Ukraine military aid, and we're going to stop sharing U.S. intelligence with them. This, of course, is preparing on our part for us to give up Ukraine to Russia. And then, of course, Russia is going to go into Europe. They're going to start with Poland, which, of course, is going to cause NATO to invoke Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. It is then going to be NATO against the Russia, which the United States will be dragged into. But it's unclear. It's clear here that the United States will not be fighting with NATO. In fact, we might withdraw before then. So it'll just be Europe versus Russia, in which, of course, Putin will overtake Europe. And then, of course, it's going to land on our front door in the United States. Putin is not just a dictator. He's an expansionist dictator. And this is something that, Zelensky said in that chaotic meeting with Trump and Vance. He said, eventually we're going to feel it, and we're going to feel it, meaning that war is going to come over here. This type of expansionistic dictatorship talk is something that alludes back to the 1930s when Adolf Hitler tried to do the same exact thing. So, Donald Trump's first speech to Congress here, this joint session speech to Congress, was full of mendacity, it was full of racism, it was full of xenophobia, and it was full of nonsensical claims. Touted for more than 1 hour. And as the person who is the highest in the land, it is also worth reminding us here every day that he is a 34-time convicted felon. He was impeached for insurrection. He was investigated for insurrection. So, of course, that's treason against the United States. And everything is happening here. Everything is happening here. It's not to say that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist, which, of course, he is. He incited insurrection. He did not just commit treason against the country when he did that. But he also is committing treason against the country, in effect, by allowing the United States to align with the Axis powers and not the Allied powers, in a way that is going to be so globally catastrophic that we most definitely are going to feel it, as China is making statements like they are ready for any type of war with the United States. The threat that pulling away from globalism plays is so huge and is so big that when it comes time for the United States to go into war, or when is there a major threat against this country, our NATO allies will not come to our aid. They will not come to our defense. They will not support us because we will have alienated them with economic repression. We will have alienated them with threats against invasion. And we will have continued to alienate them by denouncing them and criticizing them and taking the Axis's powered sides, the dictatorship's powers, the dictatorship of the world's, their powers in terms of their side, and not with our allies. When that time comes, the United States, mark my words, will be alone. Because isolationism helps no one. It doesn't help anybody. Isolationism hurts, actually. It is catastrophic, it is detrimental, it is terrible. Globalism is the way to go, but of course, all the dictators of the world are clapping that U.S. aid is being ended and the United States is reducing its role on the world stage. And globalism is ending because the United States no longer believes in that under this conservative administration. Because, of course, the fall of the United States is the fall of Europe. The United States reducing its role in globalism and becoming weaker and more conservative and more authoritarian is the fall of Europe. And that's what people have to understand here when we talk about geopolitics. That is the danger here. And that is something worth watching. That is something worth covering. That is something worth understanding. There is a major existential threat coming from within, and it is the President of the United States.